Hello, everyone. So welcome to the latest in our ECOP webinar series. We'll just give a few minutes for people to join. And yeah, we'll be with you. We'll be with you shortly. Mhm. Okay, well, I think we'll get started now that it's ticked over. So hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jess Colbush, and I'll be assisting, moderating, and also your technical support for today. I'm part of the ECOP programs training and mentoring task team. For those recently becoming familiar with the UN, with the Early Career Ocean Professional Network, it is a program at the heart of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and was endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade as a network program in 2021. Our mission is to elevate and strengthen the diverse perspectives of new generations of ocean professionals through a collective voice, ensuring that knowledge is transferred between experienced and early career ocean professionals to promote ocean sustainability for the ocean that we want. As part of the knowledge we want to share among future professionals and professionals, we've developed a series of webinars that aim to train and inform this community of ocean lovers. And today we have an exciting and super interesting webinar. Our episode number 28 is dedicated to the practice of protecting and restoring blue carbon ecosystems, and it is presented by the IORA Blue Carbon Hub. With that in mind, Matt Vandercliff will be moderating this session and I'll be helping with questions and in the chat. He's a senior principal research scientist at CSIRO and the director of the IORA Blue Carbon Hub. And with that, I will pass it over to Matt.
Thank you, Jess. And well, good afternoon from me. And it'll be good morning to many of you and maybe even good evening to some of you. But hello and welcome. And thank you to all of you. And thank you to Jess and the team for helping us to mark International Day for Conservation of the Mangrove Ecosystem, otherwise known as Mangrove Day. Mangrove Day is tomorrow. So we're going to have a little bit of a chat around some aspects to mark that. Not only marking Mangrove Day, but 2025, we are in the middle of the UN Decades of Restoration and Ocean Science. So we're going to talk a little bit about all of that with a particular focus on restoration and action today. My name's Matt, as Jess has mentioned. I look after something called the IORA Blue Carbon Hub. The hub serves 23 member states of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. We serve as a knowledge hub and we convene conversations just like this to try and bring people together and advance our knowledge, our understanding, and try and facilitate action. Importantly, not just talking, but trying to get to action. So that's what we are about today. And our speakers today will talk to you a little bit about what they're doing, and they've all been selected partly because they've been through programs that we have for early career ocean professionals, but importantly because everyone's involved in translating knowledge into action. So before we start, we're just going to do a little bit of a get to know each other exercise, and Jess is going to pull some levers and push some buttons behind the scenes. So what's our first question, Jess? I think we're asking, where are you all from? So let's give us a bit of an indication. We'll just run this for 30 seconds or so. Click the right button. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and whether you are an early career ocean professional. We're going to let you define that. I won't define it for you. If you identify as early in your career, press the button. All right, we'll let that run for a few seconds. And while that is happening, I'll just point out down the bottom of my screen, And if you're at a computer, probably at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a phone somewhere, there'll be some buttons. Now there's a chat button. Use that to tell us about yourself, talk amongst yourselves, whatever you like, really. And then there should be a Q&A button. There is on my screen. Hopefully there is on your screen. Use that to start posting the questions. So we'll have brief questions in between our speakers, and we'll try and have a good chat at the end where you get to ask questions of everyone as a panel. All right, I think our
Okay.
30 seconds is up. How did we go, Jess?
Yeah, so I'll share these results now. Got people
All
joining
right.
from everywhere.
Okay, we do. So Asia is right out in front, followed closely by Oceania, Australia, and other islands around. We do have people from Africa, people from Europe, and people from the Americans. Well, it will be good evening to those of you in South America, I guess. Wonderful. And what are we ranking on our ECOP scale? What's our audience like, Jess?
Looks like we've got about a 50-50 split, which is good. Means we've got a variety of different people joining us at different stages of their career. So yeah, that's good to see.
All right. Excellent. All right. We've got great variety in the audience today. And we have got great variety in our set of speakers coming to you from all over the Indian Ocean. And our first speaker today is one of our IORA Blue Carbon Hub early career ocean professionals from very recently, Josfat Gachoki coming to you from, I think you're in Nairobi today, Josfat, is that right? Where, well,
Yeah.
when you came through in Perth, you were with Kenya Marine Fisheries Research Institute, but tell me where you are now.
Uh, Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. So my name is Josephat from Kenya, currently in Nairobi with an institution called Regional Center for Mapping of Resources for Development. Yeah, so more of mapping and also more of ecology. So combining the two. So my background is more on the ecology, although biased towards marine. So now I'm trying to work with GIS people, try to see how we can synchronize about the observation, the physical observation using our eyes, and then the satellite observation using the GIS and the remote sensing technology. Yes, so that's my
Excellent.
background. Yes.
All right. Well, thank you, Josfat. The floor is yours. You can share your screen and take it away.
Okay, let me share my screen. Just a minute. Okay. Share. Let me know if you're able to see my screen.
We can see your screen. It's not yet in the full screen presenter mode. Yes, and now it is. Okay.
Oh, okay,
All
okay. Thank you,
over to
thank you.
you, Josfat.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt and the team. And also welcome participants. So, like Matt introduced, I think we want to talk about the mangroves, but in this regard, we're talking about restoring mangroves and maybe understanding why we go about the whole aspect of restoring mangroves. So, in a precursor to that, we are in the decade of ecosystem restoration, at the same time, a decade of ocean science. So, the two are combined. So, whatever I will be presenting is a mix and match of the two. So, in this aspect, we're talking about mangrove restoration. So, it's a question of to plant or not to plant. So when we talk about mangrove restoration, are we going to plant or not to plant? So it's a question of before we embark on anything, that's the question we should ask ourselves. Have we reached the point that we need to plant? Or have we reached the point where we just need to let the ecosystem take its course? We just need to give it enabling environment so that we are able to reach to that point whereby we only give the conditions that are required and the ecosystem will be able to take its natural course. So today I'll talk about that topic. And also maybe my colleagues will also maybe emphasize on that, maybe in the different aspects. So the question is to plant or not to plant. So in our setting or in the mangrove setting, maybe speaking from the Kenyan perspective, we normally talk about mangrove, but anytime we talk about mangrove, we talk about the zonation of the mangrove. So when you know where the mangroves are or the types of the species are, then it becomes easy for you to interact with those species, and you're able to respond to maybe a particular need to a certain requirement. Maybe if you're talking about the seaward side, what species is there? So when you are planning to plant or not to plant, you know what species you'll be working with. So this is a schematic diagram showing the different zones of mangrove found in Kenya, from the seaward side up to the landward side. So maybe it's not always a pest and cat per se, but then these are some of the general aspect or the general observation we are able to see in the mangrove area within Kenya. So from the sea up to landward, what are the species that we are able to encounter at each and every zone? So the zones we normally encounter, or the zones we can define in the mangrove of Kenya, is mostly because of maybe the tide level, how far the tide is able to reach, and also the sedimentation type or the sediment type along the zone. So those are some of the key aspects that we normally look into when we are in the mangrove, to know which species is found in which area. So if I'm able to see a certain type of sediments, I could generally spell what species I'm able to find in that area. Also, on this other end, at the landward side, we also look at what maybe sediments are found there, and then maybe you are able to use that to give you a general indication of what species is found in a certain area. But this is not like very straightforward. So you have to go into the mangrove and you're able to establish this. So this one gives a general out view of the same. So when we're talking about restoration, we always, what causes us to do restoration? May it be in mangrove, may it be in terrestrial ecosystem, or may it be anything else. Anytime you're talking about restoration, it means that something must have gone, maybe the ecosystem must have been degraded. But then before we get to that level, we have quite a number of aspects that we look into. So what caused this degradation, or what caused the loss of this ecosystem that we are talking about? In terms of the mangroves, we have the root causes of this. So this is according to maybe the Kenya case. We analyze this and we try to come up with a different aspect of what's causing the mangrove to degrade. So in this, we came up with a flowchart of the different aspects. So one of them, we're talking about the socioeconomic aspects or consequences. So under the degradation of mangrove, what does that one mean to the socioeconomic aspects of the community of that area? So the first line or the first row, you're able to see the different consequences that comes into being when our mangroves are degraded. Then the second one is on the environmental impact. So apart from the human impact, what is the environmental impact of mangrove or ecosystem degradation? So these losses, the loss and the degradation of this now, what causes this degradation? So that's why we drill down to the loss and degradation of the mangrove. It could be overharvesting, it could be agriculture, it could be reduced water flow. Then these are now the drivers we're talking about. Then it comes to what are the root causes. So the overharvesting, what is the real cause of overharvesting in this? So the last row shows us the different root causes. So if we have to deal with the degradation, we also need to understand these causes. What's the main source of these threats, and how do we address? So when we're talking about restoration, it has to be informed by the different aspects that we are looking into answering to this. So then from there, we talk about the restoration bit of it. So when we say restoration, what is it that we mean? So restoration means that an area has already been degraded. So what we want to do is to come back to the same system that was there before the degradation, or maybe achieve a scenario that is close to the prior to degradation, because we know it's sometimes we can have a degradation. Maybe if it's cutting or harvesting, it's possible to replant those trees. But if it's flooding or maybe sediment erosion in a certain area, we might not be able to achieve the same species that were there. So these are the different aspects that we need to understand, so that when we're doing the restoration, or when the aim or the bar at which we put the restoration to be, we know where we want to reach. So if we don't get to that maybe initial stage, then we can always say this is because the degradation was to this level. So in our restoration aspect, we want to do this so that we are able to reach or return back to the a prior condition that, or the prior condition that was there before the degradation aspect happened. So even with the efforts of restoration, we're seeing quite a number of huge failures in restoration, and this comes in because of either the poor understanding of the local ecosystem, or the poor application of the principles of ecological restoration. So we are saying, yes, we want to go into restoration, but then we remember the zonation bit I showed you. So if the right one, or if the C1 side is the area that has been harvested, and then I want to come plant a species that's not growing in that area, then that's a mismatch. Even if I do 1,000 or 1,000,000 trees in that area, that's not going to that, or that does not grow in that area, then we expect to have a huge failure in the efforts that we put into restoration. So we need to understand what is it that is causing this, and then we remedy that. So we have two aspects we look into, or the principles of restoration. So one is on ecological principles, then the other one is on economic principles. So under ecological principles, we are saying we need to first of all understand the sites. So the sites that we want to do, we need to do an assessment of that site so that we understand what's happening in that area. So in this case, we're talking about, it could be an observation, or it could be due to water flow in that area. So we need to do a site assessment to understand what caused the degradation in that area. Another one is the species selection. So under the different zones or the different sites that we've assessed, what species is grown in that area. So when we know the species, that it becomes easy for us to know, match the area and the species that we want to restore in a certain area. So again, these species we want to restore in that area, do we have a source of those seedlings in that area, or do we have to transport them from a far distance? Remember, if we have to transport them maybe from a neighboring country, then it means the genetic material mix in that area, it could cause maybe the invasive aspect of it. So we need to understand, we want to restore this area, but we also need to understand where are we sourcing our seedlings for the restoration. Then in case whereby we are not able to do direct planting, then we need also to establish a nursery. So establishing a nursery is always where applicable, because it gives the seedlings enough time to stabilize before transferring them to the area that we've assessed and we want to do restoration in that area. So again, once we do the nursery, we also need to do what we call the adaptive management. We need to check, is this nursery doing okay, or did we plant the wrong type of species? Is this nursery growing? Has it reached the level that it's okay now to transfer them from the nursery sites to the area that's being planted? Or also, again, we look at if there are other changes that are happening in the area that we assessed. Assuming we assessed maybe 6 months ago, the nursery, it needs to take 6 months. So before transferring this, we also need to check again to see if there are other changes that have happened between the months that we have. So you're saying restoration is not a one-time option. It's not just planting and going away. It's a long process. So once you plant, you need to come back or follow that process until you have your forest back to the condition that was there before, or maybe has attained a certain aspect or a certain level that you intended to reach. So under the socioeconomic aspect, again, we need to look at the community engagement. So restoration is not a one-man activity. Where you are restoring, if it's a natural ecosystem, you need to get the support of the community. So we need to engage the community in that. So in each and every step we undertaking this, we need to tell the community, we need to work with the community for them to understand what's happening in the different aspect that we want to undertake. So then also, why are we doing this? We also need to get the value for what we're doing. So what are the different values that we can get from the ecosystem, per se, in this case, the mangrove ecosystem. Again, also, we have different policies that we need to follow. Yeah. So if the country requires that anytime you're doing restoration, you need to inform the government, then that should be followed. So that way, the government also keep tracks of what's happening on the ground, and they can be able to tell if whatever we are doing on the ground is being effective or not. So again, we're saying we have those aspects. So with whatever the restoration part of it, we are saying that's when the ideal condition are happening. But again, we see quite a number of times people are going into restoration without necessarily understanding what's supposed to happen. So some of the common mistakes that people should avoid when doing the mangrove restoration uh, can show you here. So sometimes we go into restoration without necessarily knowing why we are doing restoration. So we just restore because somebody has said we need to restore an area. You didn't assess the area. So when you put much effort in that area without prior assessment, the effort could be futile at the end of the day. Again, some people also plant in areas that are not supposed to be planted. Yeah, so people want to plant in mud flat or sand flats, whereby, like the picture you see on the first right corner, people have planted in the sand flats. Actually, the species they planted there is Rhizophorum cronata. Yet that's not the area of Rhizophorum cronata. Below, you see another picture whereby people have planted the Syrops tagal. Yes, that's the correct zone of the Syrops tagal. But then when you see how it's being done, then that's the wrong way of doing the restoration in that area. So those are some of the common mistakes that we need to avoid, in addition to the different ones that we've shown here that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about restoration. So we're saying restoration, but then we also emphasizing that it should be participatory aspect of it. One, when we do it in a participatory aspect of it, then it brings a long-term sustainability, because the community will be the one who are directly linked to the area that we are working with. They will be able to have now direct maybe patrols. If the government entities are not close there, then they're able to work with the community in that area. Again, we're talking about leveraging on local community and the ecological knowledge that they have in a certain area. Sometimes we could come in maybe with a satellite image with whatever information we have, but then we could always leverage on the community, and then we can get maybe what was the initial stage, or what was the initial condition of that area before the current scenario happened in that area. Also, when we do with the community, it becomes easy for them to own the whole activity, and they will be able to do this. So the approaches that we are always advocating is, first of all, before conducting any restoration, we need to have a stakeholder assessment. Who are involved in this area? You don't want to bring people from Tanzania to Kenya to do restoration, yet we have people in Kenya who are supposed to do restoration in that area. Once we have identified the stakeholders, then we go to site assessments. So apart from the imageries, we also need to do a ground truthing with the community, and also for them to understand why we are talking about a certain intervention that we need to do or to undertake in a certain case. So once all these are put into place, then we also need to come up with a plan, a restoration plan. So when we want to do the planting, what species are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to go about the whole aspect? So we need to come up with a plan on how we want to do the whole process, even following it post the plantation. Again, also implementing and monitoring. So once we have the plan, now we go on the ground and work out with the community on how we're going to go about the whole aspect. So beyond the planting bit of it, so we've planted. So what next? So many people are making mistake of just planting and leaving the forest to its own. We need to follow that forest beyond the actual planting bit of it. So we need to protect so that the forest, so that we don't, the degradation aspect does not re-emerge. Again, we need to continuously check the area that we've planted to see that the debris are not causing maybe bending of the trees. Also, we need to do the survival of the maybe survival aspect of the trees, and also employ adaptive management, whereby if a certain aspect that we undertook didn't work, what is it that we can learn from nature, and then we incorporate that in the next phase of the restoration bit of it. So the different modes of restoration. We could use natural restoration. We could use hydrological restoration. We could use artificial planting, or we could use enhanced method. So like the last picture is on its relay encasement. So in this area is whereby we have a high erosion rate. So we need to check and maybe use as an appropriate method that is able to adapt to a certain aspect. So then the future of restoration, we are saying beyond this, so what is it that we need to put into place so that we are able to maybe attain a better of this? So we need to advance in mapping so that we are able to identify the suitable areas, integrate the initial blue carbon, integrate the restoration to the initial blue carbon initiatives, so that we are able to get finances that will be able to sustain this restoration aspect to that. Then redefine the science that we're using. So the restoration, you could plant an area where you had assessed the condition are okay, but then the part of the microbes, maybe we are not able to do that because it could be a little bit tedious or it could be more intensive. So we need to redefine the scientific research into this aspect of restoration. So, like I said, the global relevance of the whole restoration is one, we trying to work towards the targets two. The GBF target two is on restoration. So by doing this, we'll be able to answer to this question. SDG 14 on ocean issues, then the trying to also answer to the question of ocean science and ecosystem restoration. So in this case, I said I'm coming from Regional Center for Mapping. So what's the role of RCMRD in this? So we're trying to come up with the different aspect of how we can support different countries because we are working with countries on trying to build capacity on the different aspects. So for this part, RCMRD is trying to come up with the different resources. So for example, we have a map book we just produced the other day that's showing the different parts or the different mapping aspect that we could employ to enhance our capability in conservation and also in restoration. Also, we have like a geoportal that's able to hold different data sets on the different ecosystem that we could use on those. Again, RCMRD has been selected like a CBD technical support center whereby it calls in all different people with different expertise to come together and then disseminate that expertise to a different community or the different ecosystem or the different entities that require the expertise to be able to work towards the KMGBF targets or the 23 targets. So this also forms part of the IORA, could also be one of the entities that joins in this call so that we are able to have the different expertise in the marine ecosystem to be able to reach the different communities within the Western Indian Ocean in terms of the marine restoration or marine science in that aspect. So in conclusion, we are saying to plant or not to plant. So planting must be strategic, ecologically sound, and community driven. So the other part we are saying the most successful way to do mangrove restoration is to get the right physical, biophysical and socioeconomic condition and let the ecosystem heal naturally. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josfat. And yeah, some great thoughts to end by. And I also wrote down some things. Restoration is a process. I think that's a really important insight. And restoration is not a one-person activity. It takes a village or it takes a community. Thank you, Josfat. So remember to put your questions in the Q&A. I have seen introductions happening in the chat. Thank you for that. People introducing themselves from Indonesia all the way through to Ghana. It's been great. Thank you. So while I look at the questions, perhaps Jess, we can put up our poll. I think we were going to ask people what their role was, whether they're a researcher, a policymaker, and
Yeah.
a practitioner.
I will
So let's
I
pop
will
that
start
up.
that poll now. There we go.
Okay. And while that poll's up, I'm going to look at some questions. Question for you, Josfat, from Adriana. Which ecological indicators do you use for measuring the success of restoration? That's a great question. And then for how long after restoration do you need to monitor the area to assess success? Would you like to try answering that one, Josfat?
Yes, so the ecological indicators could mean maybe different aspects. So for our case, remember we talked about the site assessment. So before planting, we had to check what's on the ground, assuming we didn't have maybe small plants in that area naturally. So when we do maybe restoration, we see other plants coming in that area. That's where we will be able to tell if that area has now reached to a level that it's attracting other species to come into that place. Another one we normally look, which are easy, is the biodiversity in that area, assuming the number of crabs. So before restoration, we always do an assessment of the crabs number. So if we have a certain number, after we do restoration and then we take a certain period of time, we'll come back again, assess the barrels of the crabs, and then we are able to tell, is there a difference before and after restoration? So that's the basic or the quick maybe things that we are able to tell, and also maybe that are easy also for the community to be able to check. But beyond that, we could also check maybe the growth rates of the plants that we've planted, maybe the number of leaves. At what time are they supposed to have a certain number of leaves? When are they supposed to have the number of branches in that case? So then how long you do monitoring? I think once you plant, you start monitoring immediately, because remember, these are small plants. So it could start maybe after a week. You want to see, you planted maybe last week, how many are still standing, or how many were uprooted, maybe assuming somebody didn't put in the right depth. So it could have been swept away by the wave. So you also need to do that. So that's after 1 week. Then again, after maybe even into months. So after month, you also come to check how many are still surviving. Remember, when we transferring them maybe from the nursery, or when you direct plant them, some might do well and others might not. So depending on how they were planted and how they were transferred from the nursery to the area that we're planting, you also need to check how many are still surviving and how many are dead. So that also gives you an indicator of and that's where we come into the part of the survival rate. After planting, how many are still surviving up to maybe after 1 month? After 2 months, you come again. Then after 3 months, then the trees, we are assuming they will have started showing the leaves. So you come now start counting the number of the leaves, so that you're able to tell what's the growth rate of that. Is that area that we planted ideal for that species? Because the rate at which the leaves are forming will also tell you the rate at which the tree is growing, meaning the condition on the ground are either conducive or not conducive. So after a month, after 2 months, so it should be a continuous part of it. Then maybe after 1 year, when we start now measuring the DBH, the diameter at breast height, to see how the growth rate and also the carbon sequestration in the trees that we've planted. So depending also with the resources and also the agreement with the community, you could be there to do that monitoring, or you could train the community, because they are close to the area and they are always using that path maybe to go fishing. They could do a quick monitoring of that area. So it's a process. I wouldn't say it's a one-time thing, but it could be a continuous. So we are encouraging to have it as a continuous aspect, so that at least from the science bit of it, but also from the community aspect part of it.
So restoration is a process, which means that the assessment becomes a process as well. And it sounds like that's a whole other talk that maybe we have to do another day. There's a lot involved. Thank you for the question. There's more questions coming in. We will try to get to as many as we can. How did we go with our poll, Jess? What audience? What are our audience mostly involved in?
It looks like we've got mainly researchers in the audience, about 50%. And then we also have a few restoration practitioners, which is great. So I'm sure they're learning lots. And then we've got a few policy makers, and then a couple in the other category as well.
Excellent. Thank you, everyone. That's really useful to know. Look, there are more questions coming in. We will try and get to as many as we can, but we're going to have more of a panel at the end. So let's try and move to our next speaker. Thank you to Josfat, and I shall introduce Waruni Tisera, coming to us from Sri Lanka. Waruni is also an alumnus from our ECOP program and is a research officer working on mangrove restoration for the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society, and working in Anuwinundaba, Ramsar area. Over to you, Waruni. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Matt, for the kind introduction. And let me share my screen first.
It is coming up.
Hope you can see my screen.
We can see your screen now. We just need you to put it into the, there we go. It all works. Okay.
Oh,
All
okay.
yours,
Hi.
Varuni.
Yeah, thank you, Anne. And hi, everyone. And greeting to you all. So I'm Varuni and currently working in Sri Lanka and mangrove conservation. And the project I'm involved is called Accelerated Natural Regeneration of Mangroves project in Sri Lanka. And it's so far beyond planting, and it's about restoring an ecosystem. And Joseph already shared a lots of insight on the principles of restoration, and I can say that this project is an example from Sri Lanka which followed those restoration techniques and the principles. And I will share my story here onwards. So in Sri Lanka, one of the major threats to the mangrove degradation is aquaculture, and especially the shrimp farming. And here in this photo, you can see the where our restoration project is going on, and it is located in the northwestern province of Sri Lanka. And here you can see that this water canal, along this water canal, there's a pristine mangrove belt, and then the left side, it's active shrimp farms which were developed clearing the mangrove forest in the area. And the other side, the right side, it's our restoration side, and it also once a shrimp farm and then abandoned for years. And so this is a very close-up photo of the area, and for around 30 years, it was an abused and barren land without no proper vegetation. So then the Department of Wildlife Conservation, which is a government representative and the owner of the legal owner of the area in the Ramsar, as Matt said, so this land located in the Anavilunda Ramsar wetland, and the Department of Wildlife Conservation is the legal owner. And collaboration with other NGOs and private stakeholders, they initiated this mangrove restoration project in 2019. So after proper baseline surveys, that we have identified that majority of the vegetation that were previously there before the shrimp farm were mangroves, and then therefore it's a clear justification for a mangrove restoration project in the area. Therefore, then we started this project, and during the initial phase of the project, one of the major barriers uh, is the lack of proper hydrological flow to the site, and then it has suppressed the natural regeneration of the mangroves and the natural vegetation there. Therefore, after proper investigations and based on the expert consultations, we introduced the fishbone canal system to the site to increase the water movement and the seed flow into the into the site. And then this is a technique that commonly used in the agriculture and other ecosystem restoration projects in globally. And then this is a very effective method where that the tidal water is used to inundate the area where there's very low tidal fluctuation, because in Sri Lanka, even in this area, the tidal fluctuation is very low. And also here, the straight palmate is the canal system that we established during the initial phase of the project. But during this canal establishment, we encountered a limitation that during the very extreme dry condition, the tip of the canals didn't receive the water. Therefore, we thought to consider more about consider the topography and the elevation in the area. And then latter part of the project, we went to the contour palmate, and that is that is the left right photo. And for developing the contour map, we took the support of the hydrographic unit of the Sri Lankan Navy, and with the support of them, we developed this contour map to the site, and then using that, now we are excavating the canals. And now we are not encountering that limitations, and throughout the year, we can see the water in the canals, even in the tips. So after that, another barrier for the restoration, the regeneration of this mangrove ecosystem is that the suppressed natural regeneration of the vegetation, and therefore we are conducting an initial planting in the area, and for that we are only using the naturally flowing seeds in the area. And for that, sometimes we are using direct planting for some certain species, and for some certain species we are using the nursery raised plants. And for the planting also, we are taking the support of the volunteers working with us, even in the private stakeholders, and also the communities around the area and the university students. And we are giving more attention to only to plant the mangrove species naturally available in the area. And here is a photo of the initial that we took in during the initial phase of the project. And these are Rhizophora mucronata planting, and we use that plant as a nursing plant to stimulate the settlement of other mangrove species. And this is with the time how the restoration is progressed, and this is the current status of our restoration project. And I said that our restoration project is called Accelerating the Natural Regeneration Project. So we are giving more focus on establishing the natural vegetation there. And these are some of the examples of how the natural acceleration happened in the area. And you can see here, these are some of the Rhizophora micronanda plants that we established. And here, these are Avicennia marina, which is one of another mangrove species, naturally established in the canal areas. And yes, this is beyond planting. It's about restoring ecosystem. Therefore, we are not concerning only about the flora and also about the fauna. And this is a very latest video we captured during our restoration activities. And also now in our restoration site, we can find every kind of fauna that is available, that is living in the mangroves. And these are some of the examples. So apart from the restoration, we also giving more attention to the monitoring, reporting, and tracking the progress of our restoration. And for that, we are conducting periodical assessments in some aspects. So for that, we had a challenge to find the manpower, because it's around 45 hectares of land, and we need more manpower. Then the volunteers who are visiting our site, we use them, and they are supporting us to collect the data. So this is one of that kind of survey that we are conducting to assess the growth and the survival rate of the established mangroves. And also we are conducting surveys on assessing the water quality of the area, and assessing the bird and butterflies and the floral diversity and the fauna diversity in the area. And also, while we are doing this monitoring and assessing the success of the project, we sometimes there were some gaps that we need to address, and those gaps we converted into the research and invited the young researchers who are working in the university, even the undergraduate or the postgraduates, to join us and help that support us to conduct those research, which will address those gaps. And as an example, sometimes we wanted to know that the fruiting or the flowering season of the some certain species and the germination techniques and even the carbon content or the flora diversity in some areas. Therefore, those researchers are now engaging with us to provide those to address those gaps. And so we are conducting floral studies, even the carbon and other soil parameters, and also the fauna, pollution, and also we are giving more concern to product development using the sustainably using the mangrove resources naturally available. And apart from all of these barriers, there was another major challenge for us during the initiation of our project, and that is the negative attitudes of the community around the area. And but somehow with the proper awareness and closely working with them, now we were able to work closely working with them and attract them to our restoration site, and they are now working with us to conserve this precious ecosystem. So apart from the daily activities that we are doing with the communities, we also plan some trainings that will help them to enhance their livelihood, and which will also create a sense within them to conserve the surrounding their natural ecosystem. And this is one of that for trainings that we have conducted. And also we are giving more focus on spreading awareness among the different types of communities, even in the school children, the local community, the private stakeholders, universities, and that is also a major part in our restoration project. And accounting all of these things, that I would say that one of the major achievements so far in our project is receiving the World Restoration Flagship Award in 2024 to the mangrove restoration in Sri Lanka. And this particular project that I'm working is one of the examples that they take as an example that they take to give this restoration flagship award. And so as per my point of view, that I believe there's two main things that lead our project to the success. And one is the science and community driven approaches which we followed so far, and also the strong cooperation among the every kind of stakeholders and the communities that we are working with. And I believe these are the two main things that help us for our success. And this is, in nutshell, this is our project and the story that I wanted to share with you all. And thank you.
Thank you, Varuni. Great presentation. And you talk about the assisted natural restoration, which is somewhere in the middle of Josfat's continuum from planting to completely natural restoration. So it's great to have that as an example, but also importantly, that question about beyond the planting of trees and looking after the mangroves themselves. Can we restore the ecosystem? We can plant the trees or we can bring the mangroves back, but can we bring the ecosystem back? So really good to see insights about how that is happening in Sri Lanka. Thank you, Waruni. All right, more questions. Now let's get another poll up for us. Now, what was our next poll? Jess, did we have one? We had, yes, ecosystems. What ecosystems are we working in? And while that poll is up, I'm just looking at the questions. So go ahead and click on what applies to you. Even tell us more in the chat if you like. Waruni, I might go to the question from Govindya, which is an interesting one around how do we predict and ensure the restored area's ecological succession. So forests are not static. What we have today is not the same as what we expect to be there in 50 years. How can we ensure that we're looking after those kind of ecological processes? What do you think from your experience, Waruni?
Matt, can you please elaborate that question more because I was focusing on the poll a lot.
Of
I'm
course.
sorry.
Sure, it can be distracting to have more than one
Yeah.
thing. The question is about ecological succession. So, we expect a certain vegetation to appear today, but then in 50 years that will have turned into another type of vegetation, and that's normal for coastal ecosystems. So,
Yeah.
in your example in Sri Lanka, is there a way that we can ensure that that can keep happening?
Uh, so here, as I said, Prasan, that we are not focusing on like taking some ecosystem that were not like previously weren't there. So we
Hmm.
are trying to accelerating the naturally establish what was there. Therefore, then after the proper baseline surveys that we found that the surrounding area is mangroves, and then because of that, we help that creating the uh, hydrological flow and helping to and triggering the planting there, mangrove planting. We help them to establish the natural ecosystem that was there, and I think then as now we gave the chance to the ecosystem, the nature to establish the proper or the suitable ecosystem based on the conditions and everything. I think, yeah. So from our side, we did the what is best and what is suitable for the current situation, and the
Yeah,
nature will change
right,
things according their conditions in future. Yeah.
right. Thank you. And then one more for you from Naima. I think we can look at very quickly. What were the main issues that the local communities raised against restoration? You showed that photo of
Yeah.
people holding some kind of banner. What were their objections?
Yes, because during the initiation of the project, that was a barren land for 30 years, around 30 years, but no one used that land for anything. But that the people, the community who protest against us was a coastal community, and currently they are facing for the erosion and that kind of issues, and then some because of the influence of some politicians that uh, they wanted to trigger the community that someday that they can use this particular area for their living, but it's not an actual thing because they were guided by someone else with some other intentions, and then from our proper awareness, they realize that they cannot use this area for their living because it's a wetland that cannot live. So then, with the proper awareness, we how somehow we managed to convince them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. And we'll stop distracting everyone with the poll now, Waruni. So,
Yes.
Jess, what were what was our poll results on Day of the
So,
Mangrove?
so it looks like we do have the most people do work within the mangrove ecosystem and work on mangrove ecosystems. So that's great to see. And then we've got a few people as well with in this working in the seagrass area as well as other ecosystems and the tidal salt marsh and corals. So we've got a really good spread of people working with different areas.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I guess it is appropriate that on Mangrove Day we have a large audience who think about mangroves. All right, let's bring up our third speaker for today, Dr. Sundi Rama. Are you in the house? You are.
I am in the
All
house.
right, Sundi Rama. So Sundi came through a program. Well, now that was in what, 2017, 2018. It was an early career program then. Are we still calling you early career, Sundi? Yeah, you are now acting director of the Blue Economy Unit in Mauritius. So that sounds like you've maybe advanced to middle career at least. All right. The floor is yours, Sundi. Take it away.
Thank you, Matt. Here we go. So I've seen from the poll, we actually have people working on seagrass, so not to disappoint, I'm going to talk about seagrass as well and get back to mangrove afterwards, if that's okay.
Excellent. And you are now visible, so take it away.
Perfect. I'm going to start by saying what I like to say most. I'm first and foremost a scientist. I work at the Albion Fishery Research Center. And what's the role of the Albion Fishery Research Center in Mauritius? It's actually the technical arm of the ministry, which looks after blue economy and fisheries. And our role actually is to bridge this gap between science and policy. So why I'm doing this, the project I'm going to set the scene for, I was the National Blue Carbon Project lead for the project, and it's still an ongoing project. Right, thing is not moving. Just a little concept on Mauritius. Mauritius, the Republic of Mauritius is actually located in the Indian Ocean. Just an insight for people out there who doesn't know where Mauritius is. So we're a small island. That's the main island. And then we have several other islands, such as Rodrigues and Gallagher, which all inclusive becomes the Republic of Mauritius. We have our official language, this is English, but we do speak Creole, which is the most common and mother tongue. Of approximately 1.3 million people living there. And we have the mainland area, which is the mainland Mauritius, which is 2,040 kilometers square. However, as compared to other places or other islands in the region, we have one of the most biggest EZ for the different islands there. Just a caption to put it up there, per capita, as per the World Bank report in 2022, we are actually emitting carbon dioxide to 3.39 metric tons per capita. What does Mauritius as an island, focusing on the SIDS, is facing, just like other countries? We are facing sea level rise, and sea level rise is coming up with global warming, and global warming is created by climate change. So in the few coming years, Mauritius, being an island, is going to be very much affected with sea level rise, and hence the necessity for us to be able to come up with nature-based solution and to protect our coastal ecosystem and to reduce our carbon emission and to help other countries as well to move towards that. So what's the benefit of blue carbon ecosystem? So we could use them for recreational, we could use them for coastal protection, we can use them for fisheries enhancement. And this is the whole aspect that I want to bring here in this presentation and this project we're working. We don't just want seagrass and mangroves as blue carbon ecosystem to be heard or to be used only for one specific direction or sectors. For example, nowadays, everyone is rushing behind blue carbons and forgetting all about the fisheries enhancement, the recreation protection, and the coastal protection as well. What's the project? The project started back in 2019, where the ministry came up with a project to find out what's happening in our seagrass ecosystem, which at that time was not clearly mentioned in the policy, in any policy decision to under the protection and the conservation. So the Blue Carbon project by the ministry, we identified that there was a lack of knowledge on seagrass density and distribution. There was a huge knowledge gap in the efficiency of seagrass beds to act as natural carbon sink. And of course, there was no, at that time, baseline data on carbon storage capacity in seagrass. bringing back this aspect of carbon emission, I think everyone can get their own for their country, which is kind of really reliable nowadays. The source is Worldometer. You can actually have a trend of the different fossil carbon emission that is being emitted per year by different countries, and gives you the reason how much per capita is actually being produced by time. So for this one is 2022, and I think it still needs to be updated for the 2024, which is coming very shortly. Come back to the project. So the aim was to investigate the current status of the seagrass, to get the blue carbon content storage, and of course to come up with formulation of policies for conservation, rehabilitation, and even get to know more about how seagrass is actually sequestrating and storing carbon. The project was divided into 3 components. First component, to be able to do all this stuff, we need to actually know what's the species composition, what's the density, the distribution of seagrass around the mainland island. And then this was followed by the assessment of blue carbon. So we had several coring at different key areas around Mauritius, and to determine how much carbon is actually being stored in these seagrass areas. And not to neglect and not to forget, because we, even as the national policy makers, we didn't have seagrass as a protected organism, ecosystem, and conserved under our own law. So we needed to make people understand and to sensitize and to educate people as well as why we are coming up with a more robust law to protect this ecosystem. Assessment was carried out. Basically, the mapping was done under the project of the Ministry of Environment, which is the ecologically sensitive area. So they do this mapping every 2 years, and they update this map every 2 or 3 years. And this is the map that we have used as a baseline. However, these maps are out there giving us the location, the distribution, and even the extent of seagrass or other marine ecosystem. However, we need to do ground truthing, and that was our job. We actually went there, took the data of the mapping, and did the ground truthing at approximately 80% of around the Mauritius island to get to know how much seagrass is present in the different areas and what were the species composition. While using that, while doing this survey over a year, which took us over a year, we identified 5 sites of importance that was found all around Mauritius. So the site was Montchoisy, Le Morne, Albion, Bandolive, and Poste Lafayette. And these sites are all around Mauritius in the south, east, west, and north. The species abundance and diversity. Mauritius is known to be mostly in monospecific or mixed species occurring in this direction. The biggest meadow and the most apparent is the Syringodium isoetifolium mixed with the Halogule uninervis. This is found mostly everywhere around Mauritius. And then you have the Thalassodendron, which is occasionally in different meadows happening. And the Halophila ovalis and Stipulacea are not that much happening in very short abundance though. Just to give you an insight of the different surveys and the different disturbance and the different criteria, we'll look at different size. For example, seagrass at Montchoisy was around 77 hectares, and Le Morne and Bandolive being the largest, 180 hectares and 165 hectares, with a mix of seagrass species composition. However, we have noted there was a lot of disturbance at these sites, bringing them to boat mooring in front of hotels, a lot of tourism activities, kite surfing, and also fishing activities. So how we proceed with the assessment of the blue carbon storage capacity, we actually use the manual of the coastal blue carbon, which is an IPCC recommended methodology. There's 2 types of methods, the loss of ignition and the elemental analysis. So following the seagrass mapping, we did coring of 1 meter in these 5 different sites of importance. And we did have 5 centimeter resolution sediment cookies which was then go through the different processes to determine the organic carbon determination. So while a lot of country is also doing the loss of ignition, which is the most easiest and which is the most which is less expensive to carry out, the elemental analysis was carried out as well to get the more precise data on the carbon being stored and the amount of carbon, so that we could link between the loss of ignition and the elemental analysis in the future, so that when we are going to expand this carbon coring and doing the analysis of carbon content all around Mauritius, if we want to, we can still relate with the elemental analysis while doing the loss of ignition method. An outcome out of this project, so we have the paper coming up. Hopefully, Matt, I'm sure he's listening about this one. So we're getting this paper done by by next week. Hopefully, it's going to be submitted. But something more important that came out of this project is the regulation. So we had in the past the Fisheries and Marine Resources Act 2007, but just recently we changed our act to the Fisheries Act 2023, and in this act, seagrass and mangroves are actually well defined and well stipulated. For example, the law goes in if no person shall, without an applicable authorization, therefore no one can do anything to mangrove and seagrass and corals. You cannot cut, you cannot loop, you cannot remove, take, relocate, even transplant, or cause any damage to these plants, mangrove, seagrass, and corals without any authorization. Of course, the ministry is not going to give authorization for anyone to go and just cut it or cause any damage to it. We have a guideline which stipulates that if you want to cut mangroves or seagrass or corals or whatever, this has to be with national importance. For example, if you want to do research, then it can be given to you the permit with certain conditions. If you want to remove mangroves, then it needs to be with specific determination of why you want to do it. Normally, we do not give permission for removal of mangroves, but we can give permission and special exception to the trimming of mangroves if this is causing any national hazard. For example, just in front of roads and not seeing the other part of the roads. So what's next? After this project, which was on seagrass, we are moving now towards a new policy and towards new working conditions. So to give you an insight of the pathway, just like Matt said, in 2017, I was awarded the Australian Award Fellowship to come to Australia to learn more about blue carbon and what to do with blue carbon ecosystems and how to get the restoration facilities out of it. So after the 2018 IORA Blue Carbon Delegate meeting, we worked out on a project proposal which was submitted to the UNEP, and we got the funding in end of 2019 to start the project. However, with COVID in 2020 and 2021, the project got a little bit delayed, but by 2023, the seagrass mapping was completed in major parts. The first carbon sequestration data for seagrass is now available. The national campaign was launched, and new measures in the Act of 2023 was taken. So now what's the 2024 and beyond? One of the things that really kicked off for Mauritius to start on the National Blue Carbon Inventory was during the IORA Blue Carbon Hub think tank in Bali 2023. After the think tank, we worked out on a set of national priorities for Mauritius, and we came up with a systematic action plan. So for now, we have already set up the National Blue Carbon Task Force, which was launched in June 2024. So the National Blue Carbon Task Force came up after the project, while we saw that there was an importance for the protection and the conservation, and as well as to how to get the best of the ecosystem benefits from blue carbon ecosystem. So this National Blue Carbon Task Force was launched in June 2024. And the aim is very simple. It's actually to bring all the blue carbon practitioners in Mauritius to work together so that we could build a nature-based solution and involve in blue carbon ecosystems and bring recommendation, potential implementation, policy change, finance adaptation, all of these working together on a more national level. So the National Blue Carbon Task Force actually comprises of the government institutions, so all the ministries and government institutions that is involved with blue carbon, blue finance, and blue economy, work together with private sectors, which are trying to lower their carbon emission or try to offset the carbon emission, working with research institutions like University of Mauritius, and different other universities in Mauritius as well, and NGOs, which is very big stakeholders for this task force as well, as NGOs in Mauritius tend to work a lot on restoration works and on different other mechanisms. The target of the National Blue Carbon Task Force is actually to build more capacity in harmonized methodology and protocol in carbon assessment. That is in both seagrass and mangroves. We're working to come up with a more stabilized blue carbon expertise and to have policy making and working towards our national blue carbon inventory. We have the target to consolidate data to put in our NDCs. So far, blue carbon is not inputted in our NDCs. Only mangroves are being mentioned in the NDCs, but our target is to actually have the proper data to be able to include in our NDCs and to reduce our emission target. And to do this, we are working on a national action plan so that we can be guided how to do the national blue carbon inventory and framework. How it works, so the National Blue Carbon Task Force has two working groups, the scientific working group and the finance and market working group. For the moment, sorry, only the scientific working group is working because we need all the scientific data to be available before we can think of moving toward the finance and market. How is that working so far for the scientific working group? We have an ongoing project, which is the measuring of ecosystem co-benefits in seagrass, which is being a collaboration between the University of Mauritius leading and the Albion Fisheries Research Centre and the CSIRO in Australia. So work has already been carried out last year, where we have assessed the photosynthetic composition of the seagrass and the respiration rate of the seagrass. So respiration rate is kind of inversely proportional of how much oxygen and carbon dioxide is being captured and emitted, and this gives you the amount of carbon dioxide being taken by the plant. Next is the blue carbon ecosystem prospecting in Rodrigue. So Rodrigue is one of the other island in the Republic of Mauritius. So this work is being done as well in collaboration with the University of Mauritius, CSIRO, and the Rodriguan authorities, as well as the Blue Logistical Solution. So a prospecting work was carried out last year with the team to see if there's any prospection that we could do, actually bring this carbon inventory there and to get it within the Republic of Mauritius NDCs as well. There's several community-based mangrove nurseries and planting goes on. There was nursery creation at Le Monde and Albion, two different places in Mauritius, which was community and local NGO based. So most of our mangrove planting and mangrove restoration work is carried out by NGOs and community people. To note that the restoration techniques and restoration work was done by the Albion Fisheries Research Centre back in 1998. And all this technology know-how was transferred to the community and to the NGOs who are now leading for the plantation and restoration. We are at the moment doing an experimental mangrove nurseries in one of the research centre, which is the Bugaira gymnorhiza nursery, which is the rare species for Mauritius. Because to note that in Mauritius, we have only two species, the Rhizophora mucronata and the Bugaira gymnosphera. But nowadays, since 1998, every restoration work or every plantation work has been done using Rhizophora and no Bougueira. So at this point in time, we have more Rhizophora around the island than Bougueira. So this experimental mangrove nursery here, we are actually assessing the best practice to grow them and to see if there's any need for propagation afterwards so that we can bring this species back. Next in the pipeline, which is actually ongoing at the moment, we are doing the blue carbon stock in mangroves, which has already been carried out in Mauritius, and the lab work has already been processed here in Australia with our partner, the IORA Indian Ocean Blue Carbon Hub. And I think by next week, we will have an idea and the proper results of, initial result at least, of how much carbon is being stored in the different mangroves area. Now, what we aim for, the National Blue Carbon Task Force is not a platform that's going to be here all year or all along. So the task force has a deadline, which is 2027. So by 2027, we are expecting to draft and propose a national blue carbon market framework and ready for trade, and also to have the national blue carbon inventory capacity and ready for input in our NDCs. So by 2027, the National Blue Carbon Task Force is ending, leaving place to a blue carbon working group, which will be integrated under the National Biodiversity Conservation Network in Mauritius. Commitments that has been taken so far, during the UNOC 3 voluntary commitment, we are extending our national inventory not just on the main island, but we are extending it to our entire maritime zone, which includes shallow banks and other outer islands of Mauritius, which considered of Agaliga, Rodrigues, Sambronda, and Chagos. And to do that, during the Bonn Climate Change Conference that happened last month, we are happy to have secured $3 million USD to be able to start this work to support the voluntary commitment that we have taken by 2030. Just before I end, I really want to put emphasis on this here, that we are not trying to achieve a market. What we are trying to do is to have the NDCs to achieve by 2030, and this is only the surplus of the carbon, if we have, that we will put on the market as a voluntary market offset so that we can get more money to continue with the protection and conservation of our blue carbon ecosystems. So what people tend to think is that we can just grow, conserve, and rehabilitate seagrass or mangrove, or just plant mangrove because it needs to be a blue carbon, it's a blue carbon sequestration. But what they don't understand is that to have a principle of a high quality blue carbon for you to be able to put in NDCs or to have a market out of it, you need to have different aspect and different holistic approach of it. You need to see empowerment of people, you need to see nature-based solution, you need to see the fisheries sector. So all these together, that's what's going to give you the high quality blue carbon, and not just restoration or planting because you are planting ecosystem that is capturing carbon. How does that fit into the blue economy? So blue carbon is just one part of the blue finance, and this is going to be one of the efforts that is going to boost forward the blue fine that we are looking forward to boost forward in the blue finance in Mauritius. I just will end in saying that restoration is good, but first, I will tend to go with my other two colleagues who talk. We can just do as much restoration we want, but if we don't find the solution of the stresses that is getting our blue carbon ecosystem, destroying our blue carbon ecosystem, we're just gonna put a lot of money and get no results. This is the left photo is one of the site in Albion in November 2023, where there was thriving seagrass. And Albion, November 2024, there is no more seagrass. So it's approximately 11 hectares of seagrass lost. And this all occurred because there was a heavy rainfall, and the flooding took all the sedimentation into the lagoon and killed off all the seagrass. So question that I'm going to put here, and people needs to think, which happens for seagrass and works with mangroves as well. We want to invest into putting more money into restoration, but funding without a change. If we're going to put funding in doing the same work that we have been doing for the past 10 years, 20 years, we are not going to get any results. But if we do strategic funding, that is, we need to have a global holistic approach of why does the ecosystem needs restoration? What are the effects and the stresses affecting so that these ecosystem is requiring restoration? And the third question is, does this ecosystem actually require restoration? If they don't, you don't put money to do more restoration because you have money. If they do, first find out why they need restoration, or what do you need to change for that your restoration is going to work and achieve the best outcome, instead of putting money and just say I'm restoring, and after 2 years, 1 year, the same problem happens again and all your money is lost in this way. So I would say let's think wisely and in terms of the biodiversity level. And that would be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Let's think wisely indeed. And I think a lesson here is that action can take many forms. Action can be in the active restoration, but what you've just shown is action can be in the development of evidence-based policy. A 6-year journey from arriving to do a program in Australia through to legislative change in Mauritius, and now not only evidence-based policy, but time-constrained evidence-based policy. It's really great to see what Mauritius is achieving. All right, let's go to some questions. The chat's continued. I did see even LinkedIn details being shared in the chat. That's a great idea. You can connect through that way. That'd be a great legacy of this as well. Feel free to share through LinkedIn and connect that way. But let's go to some questions, and maybe we can put the panel up. I'm going to look at some questions and throw them to particular people and see how we go. And I might need to phone a friend because we're getting a lot of questions, so help to sift through them. I might go to a question that came in earlier from Suntaram Ravikumar. That one seems especially relevant for Sandy in your role as a director of a blue economy research unit. How can mangroves be restored? And let's expand that to how can ecosystems be restored while ensuring the balance between development and restoration? Maybe you can stop sharing your screen. We can bring everyone back. And then maybe you can have a go at answering that one.
All right. Well, I think I would just take the case for Mauritius, but we need to really see how different countries is working, what's the different aspect of each country's working. Because for me, working in between research and policy, especially for the Mauritian context, we've seen that the dialogue is really important. Because I'm just letting you hear a few of the examples that we had in the past. We have a lot of NGOs, we have a lot of private sectors who really want to do something for the biodiversity, who really want to do restoration work and stuff, but there are no baseline data of whether this ecosystem actually needs restoration or not. There's just an inflow of money coming up, and people are just tending to think that the government is not willing to do restoration work. This is not how it works. The government policy is we are for restoration, but we need to have baseline data of whether these places requires it or not. So this is why in Mauritius we have come up with the National Biodiversity Network, and it's a platform where we actually sit with NGOs and practitioners and researchers to find out of what are the different gaps and what are different places that requires development and what are kind of development that is being done. So we have all the platforms from the Ministry of Environment, which looks into national coastal erosion, which sits again with different stakeholders and stuff. So all this to answer from Mauritius' perspective, it's very much into we need to sit, understand, and then we can develop in synergy with research being done by the university, synergy research being done by other departments, and what actually problem is arising with the local communities and the developments happening in these areas.
Thank you, Sandy. And there is another question. Now, where was the question? Ah, yes, another question for you around the seagrass. We'll give this one to you and then maybe we'll bring the panel back. Did you consider in terms of the seagrass, if the seagrass communities were permanent, ephemeral or pioneer when you were looking at your organic carbon assessment?
Yeah, definitely. The 5 sites that were chosen to carry out the blue carbon analysis, we actually selected places that have permanent seagrass structure. For example, the Syringodium and Halogeninervis with a little bit of Thalassodendron ciliatum. So this area has been, the data for this area of seagrass there has been mapped throughout during the sensitively ecological mapping that is carried out by the Ministry of Environment. So these 5 sites was exactly chosen based on these requirements for us to do the blue carbon assessment.
All right, thank you, Sandy. All right, I'm now sifting through very interesting questions that are in the Q&A, but also there's a couple in the chat. And let's bring Josfat and Waruni back because there's also some particular questions around mangrove restoration. There's a couple of questions around how we're restoring mangroves in a shrimp farm context. One question is around whether we need to remediate the area first, for example, if there's some pollution in them. And another question is around whether we can integrate the mangrove restoration with shrimp farming. So Waruni, and maybe Waruni first, then Josfat, and then maybe Sandy. I don't know if that's relevant to Mauritius, but let's go in that order and see what we have. Waruni.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you for the question. So yeah, our project is closely located near the shrimp farms, and we are also doing our restoration project in the abundant shrimp farms. And but right at the moment, as I said, showed you in that first photo, that one side we have the shrimp farms, and right at the moment we are not encountering a major threat from the shrimp farms, but sometimes because because of there is no, sometimes there is no much control of their effluent discharging, and because of that the water quality can be degraded and the change, and that will affect the aquatic and the aquatic species, and also the seedlings that flow in the area that we are using for the naturally for our nurseries and those kind of things. And what we are what we are doing right at the moment is we are having a good connection with even with the shrimp farm owners, and they also know about that we gave them the awareness about the importance of this project, and that not to that taking the control and having the control of their effluent discharging, and not to destroy the area that we are restoring, and they are also agree with that. And so we are working collaboratively, they also that we know that shrimp farming and that this aquaculture is very much important for the livelihood and even for our food sectors and everything. Therefore, we are working collaboratively with them with the mutual understanding right at the moment.
Thank you, Waruni. And Josfat, are you in a situation in Kenya where you have the shrimp farming and are integrating issues around that, or is it mostly due to other disturbances in the mangroves?
So I think the question on integrating, because initially we talked about what caused the degradation. It could be the shrimp farming. So the way the shrimp farming was being done, in our case, is not mostly shrimp farming, but the fish farming. So we have also ponds within the mangrove area, but the way they were being done initially, people would shut an area of mangrove, thinking that's the best way to do. But then we realize that it's only takes the lifetime is very short. So because you want quick returns, you cut a huge area of mangrove. Then after maybe 5 years, that area cannot grow again. Again, you cannot do any fish farming in that area. So what would be the best option for that? So we're now trying to come up with different options of how do we integrate restoration and also allowing community to continue doing the aquaculture farming in those areas. So like Waruni showed, once you maybe within the channels, the mangroves are able to grow. In between, you also leave enough area for fish to go into. So in maybe the pods or the shrimp or the fish farm, fish pond, then we normally have mangroves around the fish pond. Remember, these mangroves also provide like a source of food for fish. The leaves that grow there, the insect that's for that also forms part of the food for fish. So if we do that, it creates an area that the fish will get food. At the same time, we'll get shade from the mangrove. At the same time, the community are able now to have a livelihood while still protecting the mangrove. So that's the thing we try to work with the community to understand how do we integrate those areas that they think are supposed to be for aquaculture, but then those were the areas of mangroves. So how do we integrate the two? So we have, like we said, we need to have a science behind that. So before we come to the community to that, we have a basis of, so this is what's working. This is not what's working. But if we integrate the two, restoration and also allowing the community to continue get livelihood from that, it becomes very easy. And also the idea for the community is easily bought in that aspect, rather than just chasing them away from the area and then they are claiming this is where we get our livelihood. So if we integrate the two, then it becomes easy for us to work in the natural way in restoration and also allowing the community to continue harvesting or benefiting from those areas.
Thank you, Josfat. And in Mauritius, is this something that we need to be thinking about?
Well, like I said, Mauritius is kind of different in terms of Sri Lanka and Africa in general, in terms of how the law works and how the people works and how the community engagement works. Because of our law, we are not allowing, we cannot, there's no projects as such that can be done within mangroves. Okay, because the law prohibits any damage or any clearing or anything on the mangroves. However, we do have barrachois, which is leased to private sectors. And these barrachois are always sometimes have mangroves all around it to within the barrachois. But the culture is mainly shellfish and crabs, not things that is going to be actually, you need to cut the mangroves to be able to do any project or continuation of these projects. But something which is not fisheries related, but a new project is popping up just recently. There's an organization in Mauritius that is pumping to do community-based bee culture in mangroves to get honey. So that's on the plate at the moment with the ministry for discussion. We're trying to find the best way solution to be able not to damage our mangrove ecosystem, but as well as to promote new ventures and new livelihood for coastal community as well. So I'm not saying that this project is going forward, but what I'm saying is that it's definitely on the table in discussion to see how we can actually have both the protection and conservation of mangroves going on, but as well as developing new business community ideas as well.
Thank you. All right, and then there is another question, which is an interesting one. This might be our last one, unless we get some more come in the next minute or so. It's a question around rural-urban differences in restoration. That's come from Rusby Wiyati. This is an interesting question. Often we're talking about restoration in a predominantly rural setting. Are there things that we need to be considering if we're bringing these actions into an urban setting? I might start with you, Sundi, since you've got the floor, and then I'll go back to Waruni and Josfat.
Thank you. Well, wow. Okay, that's an interesting question, because most of our restoration indeed is being done in the coastal areas and rural areas, right? To be honest, for the state of Mauritius, we have most of our problem happening in coastal erosion happening in rural areas. So this is where the big thing, the big concentration goes. But just recently, we started with the new project and new thinking aspect, which is reach to reef. So now we are not just moving toward restoration or getting a coastal erosion solution, what's happening in the coastal area, but now we are taking the problem much deeper, that is from the ridge, from the inside of the island. What's causing all this? What needs to be stopped or what needs to be controlled, measured from the reef? And then we move towards the reef and see how different measures can be applied here. So yeah, I think for this answer, I would say we need to go for a holistic approach. And if everyone can start by, for Mauritius, it's much easier, I understand, to go for the ridge to reef, to find out what's happening on top of the, in the mainland, what's happening in the water, and then combine these two solutions together to work together. I think that's going to give us a much better approach and much better solution to our problems.
Thanks, Sundi. Waruni, is there something that is being thought about in Sri Lanka?
As Sondi said, that even in Sri Lanka, that most of the threats are facing in the coastal areas, in where there's the local community and the people are living. And when it's come to the urban area and restoration or the conservation in that kind of area, I think before any development and any urbanization, that doing the environment impact assessments is very much important. And then based on that, we have to, I know that it has two sides, that in one hand that there's need of the development, and the other hand that need of the protecting the areas and like restoring the areas. Therefore, taking into the account the environment impact assessments, we should go forward. And also, as Josephat said during his presentation, that we should more focus on the principles behind the conservations, and following those things, we should go forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Waruni. And then finally over to Josfat, and in a Kenyan context, are people thinking about restoration in urban areas?
So maybe I will start with the challenge of that. Within the urban setting is mostly developers or people who think about money. When you talk about restoration, it's more of the environmentalists who are not more into money aspect of it. So the two are always fighting. So you want to block me from using this area where I can get money. You want to plant trees. So without them understanding how the two are able to work together, the restoration or conservation within the urban area is always a challenge for many, not only in Kenya, but most countries. But then people are now starting to understand by having the development or by having structures within the urban area, what are the repercussions, maybe in terms of the environment, in terms of the climate? So now you see now states or maybe countries are starting to adapt to creating some zones within the urban centers. So it could be a park or it could be a green zone within the park area, whereby it's within the city center. They've designated an area whereby they plant trees or they plant grass, and they use that area as maybe a relaxing area for people. So those are some of the things that we're seeing now happening in different cities, and countries or maybe the governments are embracing those. There are small steps, but countries are embracing those. Another thing is maybe in terms of the buildings that people are now doing. So they are trying to integrate between the concrete building and the natural aspect of those. So how do these buildings maybe take into place or synergize with natural settings? So an area or maybe a building is set in such a way that its wall is able to have maybe flowers or maybe something that is aesthetic but has a natural feeling, that even when people are passing through that area, creates like the feel of being in nature. So those are some of the things that I see happening in Kenya. But we also trying to work with maybe the current government. So the people, because initially the aspect of conservation or restoration was not like very much talked in, maybe some years back, Matt, maybe during your time. But currently, the way it's being done, that we have a lot of campaign around conservation and restoration. So you find that people are now trying to shift from the traditional way of doing things and always having maybe a conservation or a restoration aspect when they are planning about a certain project. I think most of the project, even before it's being given a green light, the EIA is done. So to see this project is coming, yes, it's going to destroy a certain area, but then how is it also trying to maintain that areas that are surrounding that area? So apart from maybe the bureaucracy behind maybe an EIA is done, but then the project implementer doesn't follow the clear guidelines that are outlined in the EIA. Otherwise, we have like very good ways of trying to merge the development and also maintaining the conservation aspect of the nature.
Excellent. Thank you, Josfat. And I think that brings us to the end of all our questions. We've certainly covered a lot of ground and answered as many as we can. So in terms of insights from what we have achieved today, so first of all, is that action takes many forms. Action can be on the ground planting mangroves and digging channels to assist with hydrology, but action can be also working on legislative reform. Restoration is a process, not an endpoint, and so that means that assessing restoration success is also a process and not an endpoint. And finally, I think it takes a village or it takes a community, and it takes many different skills and a lot of people to work together to achieve an outcome. So thank you to Josfat, thank you to Aruni, thank you to Sundi, but also thank you to Lauren working in the background. Thank you to Jess and team from the ECOP program, and thank you to all the attendees. And Jess, I think I'll throw over to you for the final word.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I'd like to thank all of the speakers today. This was a super interesting webinar. And for showing us all the amazing work that you've all been doing, and for especially on this important time of the year in International Mangrove Day. And I'd also like to thank everyone for participating, and please make sure you stay tuned for our next episodes, and also our work through social media, as well as the IORA Blue Carbon Hub's work through social media. And I think that their link was also put in the chat. And thank you all for participating. Bye.
Thanks all. Bye now.